The sun had barely dipped below the horizon when Elias received the letter. It arrived not by post, but through the hands of a breathless young boy, dirt-stained, coat too thin for the cold, who dropped the envelope on the wooden table of Elias's modest home and vanished into the fog without a word. Elias blinked, slightly unsettled. The boy hadn't spoken, hadn't even made eye contact. Just delivered the letter as if possessed. He reached for the envelope. The wax seal was crude but familiar, a crescent moon pressed into crimson. The insignia of the old village of Grimvik. His fingers hesitated for a moment. Then he broke the seal and read. To Elias Rune, seeker of lost spirits. We beg of your help. Something stirs in the burial grounds of our ancestors. We have tried to ignore the signs, to hush the stories, but last night, one of us did not return. The mists are darker. The dreams more cruel. The dead no longer rest. Come before the full moon rises again. Ingrid Val, elder of Grimvik. Elias set the letter down slowly. He stared out the window, watching the fog creep between the trees like living things. Grimvik. He hadn't heard that name in over a decade. Not since the last time he'd been summoned to cleanse a place of unrest and nearly lost his life to a spirit of vengeance older than the village itself. But this was different. The energy from the letter pulsed. It felt urgent, untamed. A presence stirred behind the ink, as if the words themselves were bleeding sorrow. He rose from the table, moving to the cabinet where he kept the tools of his trade. A bundle of ashwood sticks, a bottle of mirror salt, sacred thread, an old bell forged from church iron, and a leather-bound journal filled with names of the forgotten dead. Elias whispered to no one in particular, I swore I'd never return to that valley. But the dead rarely cared for the vows of the living. By noon the next day, he was riding the last railcar north. His satchel clinked softly with every lurch of the train. Snow had started falling light at first, then in thicker flakes that veiled the world beyond the window. A woman sat across from him. She wore mourning black, though her hands held no rosary. Just an old photograph. It was faded, but Elias caught the face of a young man in uniform. He said nothing, but she must have felt his eyes. She looked up, her expression unreadable. You're going to Grimvik, she said. It wasn't a question. I am. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Then God help you. Before he could ask her anything more, the train screeched to a stop. The conductor announced a short delay ahead. The fog had grown too thick to navigate. Elias stepped out onto the platform to stretch his legs. The air was biting cold, but it wasn't the temperature that made him shiver. The village ahead was hidden behind a wall of mist. But deep within it, he felt the unmistakable tug, that strange gravity that only came when something from the other side had reached out. By the time he arrived in Grimvik, the village seemed abandoned. Windows were shuttered. Doors barred. No children in the streets. No candles lit behind curtains. Only the church bell rang, once, at sunset, though the church itself had burned down 20 years ago. He followed the sound until he reached the town square. A woman stood waiting by the old well. Her hair was silver and bound in a thick braid. Her eyes were milky with age but sharp in focus. Ingrid Ball, Elias greeted. She nodded. You came. You didn't leave much choice. She gestured toward the forest. The burial ground lies beyond the stone gate. That's where the trouble began. Elias turned toward the darkened tree line. From somewhere beyond, he could hear the faint sound of a child singing a lullaby, though it was off-key, and growing fainter. The wind changed. Elias felt it again, that creeping presence, like fingers brushing the edge of his soul. The dead were calling. And he had just answered. Elias spent his first night in Grimvik under the crumbling roof of the village longhouse. Ingrid had offered him the space out of courtesy, but also caution. No home is safe tonight, she said. Not truly. The fireplace was old and quiet. The wind howled through the boards. And Elias could feel it, a lingering presence just outside the wall. Not hostile. Not yet. But curious. He sat cross-legged, surrounded by candles and sigils drawn in salt. In the center, he placed a dish of river water and stared into it. The surface rippled on its own. Something answered. A whisper slid from the water like breath on glass. You were warned not to return. Elias's spine stiffened. The voice was feminine, echoing with grief and ancient anger. But it wasn't Ingrid. Nor anyone from the village. This was someone older, someone trapped. I wasn't summoned by you, Elias said aloud. I came to help the ones still living. Then leave, Elias Rune. This land is not yours. The surface stilled. Outside, the snow began to fall harder. Morning in Grimvik was not brighter than night. The sky remained gray, the sun a faint ghost behind thick clouds. Elias stepped out with Ingrid toward the stone gate, an arch chiseled with Nordic runes, standing crooked at the edge of the forest. Ingrid walked slowly, clutching a talisman carved from bone. This gate was built when the old ones still ruled, she explained. It marks the boundary between the world of breath and the realm of hush. Hush. Elias repeated. She nodded. The silence between lives. Where the restless wander before they're claimed. He paused before the gate. The snow here was untouched, no footprints, no animal trails. Just a single, narrow path disappearing into the woods. 3 nights ago, Ingrid said, young Michael entered this forest. He'd heard something calling from the graveyard. He hasn't returned. Elias looked into the trees. He won't be the last. The burial ground lay deep in the woods, past half-frozen creeks and rows of pine bent low with snow. The gravestones were jagged and old, many toppled over. Some bore names, others only runes or empty slates. The earth around them was unnaturally soft, even in this bitter cold. As Elias approached the center, the fog thickened. He stopped. In front of him, someone stood among the stones. A girl in white. Long dark hair. Barefoot in the snow. Her back turned. He didn't call out, not immediately. Spirits didn't like being startled. And sometimes, what looked like a girl, was something else entirely. "Who are you?" he finally asked. The girl turned slowly. Her face was pale. Her eyes hollow, yet filled with tears. "You hear me?" she whispered. "Yes." "Then tell them I didn't mean to wake the others. I only wanted to be found." Before Elias could ask more, her body twisted, distorted as if being pulled by invisible strings. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Only a blast of icy wind surged past him, knocking him to one knee. When he looked up, she was gone. He examined the graves. One had been recently disturbed, its stones shattered, soil overturned. But it wasn't a shallow grave. This one had been dug from the inside out. Elias marked it with ash, lit a candle, and whispered a protection chant. He didn't know yet what he was dealing with, but it wasn't just one soul. This was a tear in the veil between worlds something or someone had ripped through. And now, they were not alone in the woods. Suddenly, a low groan echoed through the trees. Not human. Elias stood slowly, every nerve alert. The groan came again, closer, louder. Then silence. He turned and saw the first of them. A figure, tall and crooked, dressed in funeral robes rotted with age. Its face was wrapped in burial cloth. Its arms dragged behind it like broken limbs. But it moved. It walked. It was dead yet awake. Elias raised his bell and whispered, "I name you still. I name you silent. You are not welcome here." But the thing kept coming. Then, just before it reached the candle circle, it stopped. And whispered back, "Neither are you." The groaning figure stood just beyond Elias's protective circle of salt and fire. Its movements were slow, deliberate, like it had been practicing walking for centuries but still hadn't mastered it. The burial cloths that wrapped its body were frayed, stitched with symbols no living scribe had written in generations. As it shifted closer, the fabric dragged behind it like decaying seaweed pulled from a drowned world. Elias took a slow breath and raised the church-forged bell again. His fingers trembled not from fear, but from the strain of sensing what this creature truly was. Not a ghost. Not a soul seeking peace. This was something else. A body returned, but not by its own will. A marionette pulled by unseen hands. "I call you back," Elias intoned, voice steady. By ash and breath, return to slumber. The creature stilled. For a moment, the forest was silent. Then came the reply, a voice like dry leaves, whispering from a torn throat. "She called us." Elias's eyes narrowed. "Who?" But the thing only trembled, then twisted violently as if seized by pain or command, and collapsed into the snow, its form dissolving into brittle flakes of ash. Silence returned, heavy and watching. Elias stepped forward and knelt where the figure had fallen. Beneath the soot, he saw something etched into the dirt. A symbol, one he hadn't seen in years. It was the mark of Eirik Thorn. His blood ran cold. Eirik Thorn was no ordinary name. He had been a conjurer, once revered, then exiled for using forbidden rites. Rumors claimed he had made contact with the Veiled Realm and not only spoken with its inhabitants but bargained with them. Elias had studied his texts briefly during apprenticeship, but even back then the elder mentors warned, to read Eirik is to knock on a door that opens both ways. So what was his mark doing here? Back in the village, Ingrid met Elias on the church steps. The bell no longer rang. It had cracked down the center during the night. Omen upon omen. Elias showed her the mark. Her hands went rigid. "This was buried," she whispered. "Buried with the witch who betrayed us." "Which?" "Her name was Solfrid. She lived a century ago. Spoke to the wind. Saw into dreams. The people feared her, but when sickness came, they begged her for cures. When the sickness didn't leave, they blamed her for inviting it. So they burned her. And they buried what remained beyond the graveyard walls." Elias's voice was grim. "Then someone dug her up." Later that evening, Elias stood before the burnt ruins of Grimvik's first chapel. It was here, the records claimed, that the trial had taken place, where Solfrid had been chained and condemned under the full moon, the villagers chanting hymns as the fire took her. He knelt beside the scorched altar. His fingers brushed against a crack in the stone, and something shimmered beneath it, an object buried in soot. A pendant. It was shaped like a crescent sun, its center missing a gem. The metal was warm despite the cold air. He pocketed it, sensing it was no ordinary relic. As he turned to leave, the snow around him shifted, not from wind, but from movement. Quiet. Careful. He was being watched. From the broken shadows of the ruined chapel, she emerged. The girl in white again. But this time, her face was clearer. Sadder. And her voice was no longer a whisper. "She's waking them all." "Who?" Elias stepped toward her, careful not to disturb the frost. The girl pointed toward the mountains beyond the graveyard. The one in the red veil. The singer of bones. She made a promise, and now she's come to collect. Before Elias could speak again, the girl stepped backward, dissolving like mist into the dark. And then, from somewhere far away beyond the trees, across the snow-drenched hills, a sound pierced the sky. Not a scream. Not a howl. A song. Beautiful. Terrifying. A lullaby in a language lost to flame and sorrow. That night, Elias sat at his desk, his journal open. He wrote furiously. The veil is thinning faster than I feared. The walking corpse bore Thorn's mark. A witch burned unjustly, a pendant of heat in winter. And the girl, she's not just a ghost. She's a witness. Someone is reawakening the cursed. And if I don't stop it, Grimvik will become a village of the dead. He paused, pen hovering. The candle beside him flickered. Once. Twice. Then went out. And in the pitch black, a voice from behind whispered. You were too late once, Elias. Will you be too late again? He turned, but the room was empty. That night, Elias did not simply sleep. He fell. The moment his eyes closed, the cold vanished. The air grew thick, heavy, metallic, like breathing through the mist of forgotten blood. He opened his eyes and found himself no longer in the longhouse, but standing in the center of a burning meadow. The sky above him churned in violent hues of amber and ash. In the distance, he heard the slow beat of drums, but they weren't welcoming. They were summoning. In the center of the field stood a lone figure in red, veiled, unmoving. The singer. She didn't walk. She glided. Her body made no imprint in the burning soil, no sound as she moved. Only the soft tinkle of bone chimes that hung from her sleeves, made from finger joints, vertebrae, even a child's tiny rib. Elias tried to step back, but his legs were rooted. The singer raised her hands and sang. The song was not in any known tongue. It was raw and primal, a melody that made the marrow in his bones ache. With every note, the sky darkened. From beneath the ground, shapes began to rise. Not from graves, but from cracks in time itself. Forgotten things. Things that had no names. She was waking them all. Why? Elias asked, voice hoarse. The singer stopped. Her veil fluttered as if in a non-existent wind. Because they remember what you all forgot. Then she pointed behind him. Elias turned and saw a little girl, maybe 8 years old, chained to a scorched tree. Her eyes were full of tears, and in her hand she clutched a wooden horse, painted red. Lena. No, not quite. She looked like the girl who'd once haunted the edges of Elias's vision in the village. But now, her eyes were deeper, older. "Help me," she whispered. "She's using our grief. She promised to give us names again." Elias stepped toward her, but the chains erupted into fire, and the singer's voice rose louder and the meadow broke apart. He fell again. When Elias awoke, it was morning, but his breath came in ragged gasps, and sweat soaked his shirt. He grabbed his journal and wrote, "She uses grief as a vessel. She sings to the forgotten. The red veil hides her face, but not her intent. The girl, she's one of them. But she's resisting. And someone or something wants the dead to be remembered the wrong way." He circled one phrase, "names again." Then he noticed something strange. His journal page had a new entry, written in a different hand. "The fire never stopped burning. You just stopped looking." Later that day, Elias returned to the graveyard, this time bringing with him the pendant he had recovered. As he approached the girl's grave, the same one that had been dug from within, he noticed fresh snow disturbed by small footprints. Children's feet. But there were no children left playing in Grimvik. The few who remained were hidden indoors by their terrified parents. He followed the trail. It led into the woods, past the stream, past the gate, to the base of the old watchtower long since collapsed. There, beneath the rubble, he saw a single red ribbon caught in the stone. And behind it, a circle of small stones, a shrine. Tiny wooden toys were scattered around it. Some were carved, some broken. It was a mourning ring. And it hadn't been built by adults. He heard a twig snap. Spinning around, Elias found himself facing the girl again, the white-dressed spirit. Her hands trembled. "She promised us names," she said. "We were forgotten. Thrown into the cold. But she sings, and we feel warm." "Who forgot you?" Elias asked softly. "Everyone." She looked up at him, eyes suddenly wide. "She's here." The snow around Elias fell still. Completely still. No wind. No breath. Then, from the forest's edge, something emerged. It was not human. It stood tall, faceless, a humanoid shape woven of long black branches, its chest pulsing with stolen hearts. Around its neck were dozens of tiny ribbons, each one bearing the name of a dead child, written in fading ink. The creature took one step. Elias raised his warding bell and salt dagger. The girl whispered, terrified, "She's not the singer. She's her shadow." The branch woman let out a terrible sound, not a roar, not a shriek, but the creaking of old trees groaning under snow and guilt. And then it charged. Elias barely had time to react. The ground exploded in frost and splinters as he threw up a barrier sigil. The creature crashed against it with a scream that echoed through bone. He shouted a binding phrase old and sacred and cast the salt ring wide. But the creature didn't vanish. It shuddered. Then, laughed. And in that laugh, Elias realized something horrifying. This wasn't a summoned thing. It had always been here. Buried under silence. Fed by generations of unspoken grief. The singer had only given it a voice. As the barrier cracked, Elias screamed, and cast his final defense, a pulse of fire inked from his own blood. The creature reeled back. And was gone. He collapsed in the snow, heart pounding. The girl approached and knelt beside him. She placed a hand over his and said softly, "She doesn't just want to be remembered. She wants the living to suffer for forgetting." And with that, she vanished once more. Elias lay in the snow, staring at the sky. It was beginning to snow again. But now, every snowflake that landed on his skin felt like an old name being whispered into the world again. Forgotten. And waking. Elias awoke on the floor of the longhouse. The fire had long died, and his limbs ached from cold. Snow had gathered by the door frame, though the door was shut. The wind had found its way in regardless, whispering through the cracks like it carried voices from the woods. His journal lay open before him. But not where he had left it. Someone or something had written across the pages in delicate script. There were 13 children buried without names. You were the 14th. Elias's blood ran cold. He closed the book and stood, fighting off the shiver that crawled up his spine. His hands instinctively reached for his bell and dagger. He no longer felt safe indoors, not even surrounded by his sigils and wards. Not after last night. Not after her. He returned to Ingrid, who stood silently at the church ruins, eyes hollow. "I know that look," Elias said. She didn't respond. He approached, and only then did he notice what lay before her. A name had appeared, freshly carved into the old stone wall of the church. Elias Rune, born of fire. Buried in snow. The words weren't old. They hadn't been chiseled decades ago. They had appeared overnight in markings scorched into granite. Ingrid finally spoke. "You were born here, Elias." He froze. "No. I was orphaned in a southern city." She looked at him, sorrowful. "That's what you were told. But your real mother, she was from Grimvik. She vanished during the fire winter. You were found in the snow, clutching a pendant." Elias reached for his satchel, the pendant, the crescent sun. It had always been his. His voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because your name was one of the ones we buried." The past, long dormant, surged in Elias's mind. He saw flashes, not memories, but echoes. A woman crying as she held him above a blazing pyre. A hand reaching into snow. A lullaby, half sung, ending in a scream. And always, the singer in red, watching from the shadows, weaving the air into song. He staggered back, breath shallow. I'm tied to her. To all of this. Ingrid nodded. She doesn't just want revenge. She wants you. That night, Elias didn't sleep. He climbed the hill to the Watcher's Tree, an ancient birch that had once been used to hang charms and offerings during the solstice. Now, it stood silent, stripped bare, its bark scarred by symbols long outlawed. He placed the pendant in the roots and whispered, "Show me." The world fell away again. He stood in the past. A different Grimvik, younger, noisier, filled with joy. Children ran between cottages. A girl stood by the stream, laughing as she held a painted horse, Lena, not a ghost yet. Then came the fire. The sickness. The fear. The elders gathered in the church, whispering. It's her, the red-veiled girl. She walks between graves. Elias saw his mother, a quiet woman, tall and proud, arguing with them. She sings to the dead because no one else will remember them. She cried. But they did not listen. That night, they came for her. And the singer. She came too. But she did not stop the fire. She watched it. And then, she came to the crying child left behind Elias and whispered into his ear. You will remember me. Even if the world forgets. Elias awoke, heart pounding, mouth dry. In his hand was a new object, not the pendant. A ribbon. Red. His name written on it. In his own handwriting. Back in the village, bells rang again, the broken ones. No one was ringing them. The singer had returned. And this time, she was not just singing for the forgotten. She was calling their names. One by one. The wind in Grimvik changed. It no longer howled, it breathed. With every gust that swept through the snow-covered rooftops, whispers clung to the frost like forgotten lullabies. The village had become a resting place for memory, and memory, Elias now knew, was no longer peaceful. He stood at the edge of the burial woods once more. This time, he didn't bring salt or bells. He brought a list. 12 names. Scratched on aged paper, taken from church records, confessionals, and whispers from the dying. 12 children buried unmarked. Unnamed. Unclaimed. But not forgotten. Not anymore. Yet the letter in his pocket, written in red ink, bore one more name. 13. One was missing. And the 13th was angry. Elias made his way into the hollow clearing where the snow never seemed to settle, where the trees bent inward as if in mourning. There, standing silently at the center, was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 10. Hair dark and matted. Eyes glazed like wet glass. A shirt too thin for the cold, yet he stood still. Unshivering. Unmoving. Elias stopped several paces away. "I know your name." The boy's eyes twitched. Elias unfolded the list, then held up the pendant. "Your name was Ulrich. You died in the fire winter, trying to save your little sister." Still, no reply. "You were brave," Elias said softly. "You were more than a ghost. You were someone who mattered." At last, the boy blinked. Then spoke in a low, gravelly voice not his own. "No one came. No one remembered. No one whispered our names." The shadows behind him twisted. Faces formed in the snow-white eyes, open mouths, children frozen in a scream. 12 others, silent. Watching. Elias lowered the pendant. "I'm here now. I will remember. I will tell your stories." Ulrich's form wavered. For a moment, the child looked as he must have in life, young, frightened, yet full of light. But then, the veil tore. A screech echoed through the clearing as a dark red rift split open behind the children. From it, she emerged, the singer. Only this time, she wore no veil. Her face was smooth, ageless, but her eyes were voids, not black, not empty, but filled with echoes. She raised her hands. The song began again. Only now, it wasn't a lullaby. It was a dirge. A funeral for the living. The ground quaked. Tombstones cracked. Branches above snapped like brittle bones. The 12 children began to rise, pulled like marionettes on spectral strings. Their bodies flickered between memory and monster, innocent faces warped by betrayal and fire. Elias shouted, "Stop! They don't want this. You're using them." But the singer only smiled. "They were mine before they were yours. You do not own remembrance. You buried them. I am giving them voice." Ulrich turned toward Elias, tears now running freely down his face. "Make her stop, please." Elias stepped into the circle, past the writhing spirits, past the snow that fell upwards instead of down. "I don't want to silence you," he said to the children. "But I will silence her if she twists your grief into cruelty." He pulled out the final page of the list, the one he had kept blank. And with his own blood, he wrote, "Ulrich Joransson, brother. Brave. Not forgotten." The rift behind them cracked like glass. The singer shrieked. Her form blurred, fracturing into 1,000 voices. The children began to change, their bodies softening, smiles emerging. One by one, they looked at Elias, each mouthing a word he could barely hear, "Thank you." Then, Ulrich stepped forward, placed the pendant into Elias's hand, and whispered, "She's afraid of your truth. The truth that you are one of us." And just like that, they were gone. All but one. The singer lingered. Her body was fading, but her voice remained. "You may name them," she said. "But can you name yourself?" Then, with a final wail, she vanished into a spiral of ash. And the snow began to fall normally again. Elias collapsed to his knees, breath shallow, heart heavy. The forest was quiet, but the pendant in his hand now glowed with a soft light, not warmth, but memory. A gift from the dead. Back in the village, Ingrid met him with eyes full of awe. "They stopped crying," she whispered. "All of them. The voices." Elias nodded. "Because they were finally heard." She placed a hand on his arm. "But this isn't over, is it?" He shook his head slowly. "No. There's still the red veil. There's still the fire winter. And I still don't know what part of it I played." The snow had melted, but only in one place. Elias stood at the edge of the frozen stream that ran through Grimvik's northern border, where once a stone bridge had spanned across. Now, only the ruins remained, blackened and charred, untouched by time but permanently scarred by something far worse than flame. Ingrid had told him, that was where it started. The fire. The screams. The deal. Now, Elias could feel it. The air here was different. Still and heavy, like breath held for too long. He pressed his palm to the blackened stones, and the world tilted. He fell not into a dream, but into a memory not his own. The sky above Grimvik was filled with fire. But not the wild red-orange of mortal flame, no, this burned white-blue, licking the heavens like ice turned to rage. The houses burned silently. Snowflakes melted mid-air. People screamed without sound. And standing in the center of it all, a woman with Elias's eyes. His mother. Her hands were bare. Her dress, torn and soaked in blood that wasn't hers. She clutched a child, him wrapped in fur. At her feet, 12 children lay on the frozen earth, motionless. Above her, a shadow in red. Not the singer, yet not fully. Back then, she was only the voice. A being who walked in between breaths, in between deaths. Her veil wasn't woven from cloth then, it was made of fire, light and sorrow. Elias's mother knelt, tears freezing on her cheeks. "I'll give you my name," she whispered, "if you give them back theirs." The voice tilted its head. "And the boy?" She hesitated. "Spare him. Let him forget." Let him live. Then so shall it be. But he will return. One day, fire will remember him. The moment sealed itself in blood. Elias gasped awake on the bank of the stream, fingers blistered from the memory. His mother had made a pact. She had traded herself, her name, her soul to give peace to the forgotten children. But the villagers had broken that promise. They hadn't buried the children with honor. They had buried them silently, with no names, no rituals, out of fear. And so the voice the singer had waited. And Elias was the key she left behind. That evening, he returned to the church ruins, where the pendant glowed brighter than ever before. Beneath the altar, he found something new, an old lockbox scorched shut. He pried it open with his dagger, hands shaking. Inside lay a letter addressed to Elias Rune, to be read when the fire returns. A dried flower, a winter rose, untouched by decay. A single tooth, carved with the rune for truth. He unfolded the letter. My son, if you're reading this, then the flames have come for you. They always would. I made a mistake, Elias. I gave up my name to save those children, and in doing so, I gave power to a being who feeds on pain. But she was not always darkness. Once, she was a guardian. A mourner. Until we used her. Until we silenced her. She became what we made her. And you can unmake her. Elias read the final line over and over. Give her back what was taken, not just names, but memory. That night, he walked into the woods, past the graves, past the ancient birch. He carried no weapon. Only memory. He spoke aloud the names of the 12. Then 13. Then he called his mother's name. Thyrarune, daughter of Vilhild. Keeper of the sick. Protector of children. You are remembered. The wind changed. From the shadows, the singer emerged. But this time, she stumbled as if the name hurt her. She let out a ragged sound. You, speak her name. I remember her, Elias said, stepping forward. And I remember you before the songs of vengeance. Before the fire. The singer fell to her knees. The forest around them shifted, trees returned to bloom, the earth warmed beneath the snow. Children's laughter echoed, not as ghosts, but as memory finding form. You wanted to be remembered, Elias whispered. I wanted to be mourned, she replied. He took her hand. For a moment, the red veil fell away. And beneath it was not a monster, but a girl no older than 15 with eyes that had seen centuries of sorrow. When Elias returned to the village, he carried her bones in a linen cloth, not for binding, but for burial. They held a proper funeral. Names were carved. Songs were sung. No child of Grimvik would go unnamed again. But as Elias stood at the grave, the ground trembled softly. Not in warning, but in awakening. He looked north toward the old mine shafts beyond the mountains, where whispers said others still waited. And not all of them wanted peace. The village of Grimvik was waking from its long nightmare. Graves were named, voices remembered, and the singer's sorrow finally laid to rest beneath a blanket of fresh snow and proper songs. But peace was a fragile thing. Elias stood at the edge of the village, staring north beyond the dense woods, beyond the frozen rivers, toward the looming silhouette of the Iron Fang Mountains. Legends whispered of the old mines that honeycombed those peaks. Long ago, men had dug deep for silver and iron, but many never returned. Some said the mines were cursed. Others said something had taken residence there, creatures older than men, that feasted on fear and despair. And now, Elias knew better. They were the unnamed. He packed lightly. A few essentials, the pendant glowing faintly around his neck, and the journal heavy with new names and truths. Ingrid stood by the road, her eyes filled with concern. "You don't have to do this alone," she said. "There are others, but none like you." He smiled faintly. "It's not about strength anymore. It's about truth." With that, he stepped onto the snow-crusted path leading toward the mountains. The journey was brutal. Frozen winds bit into his skin. The path narrowed into icy ledges, and the sun disappeared behind thick clouds. Nights were longer here, filled with strange noises, the echo of picks striking stone, whispers that weren't carried by the wind, and shadows that seemed to watch without blinking. One night, by a flickering campfire, Elias opened his journal. Among the new names he had gathered was one he hadn't recognized until now. Mara, the Whisperer. She was said to be the first miner to vanish beneath Iron Fang, a girl who had a voice that could calm storms or summon madness. Some claimed she had gone mad herself, her whispers turning into screams that echoed down the tunnels. Elias shivered. The entrance to the mines was a gaping maw in the mountain's side, shrouded in fog and frost. The wood supports were rotted, half collapsed. But from within, faint lights flickered. And sounds. Not just the drip of water or the scrape of rock, but singing. Low and haunting. Elias stepped inside, torch in hand. The air was thick with dust and memories. His footsteps echoed against stone. He paused. A voice whispered his name. Soft. Close. He turned. A figure stood just ahead, slender, cloaked in dark cloth. Her face hidden in shadow. Mara? Elias asked. The figure nodded slowly. My voice has been waiting for someone to hear it, she said. And what do you want? To be freed, she whispered. But freeing me frees what is bound beneath. Deeper into the mines, Elias found ancient carving symbols not of any known language, depicting rituals and sacrifices, promises made in blood and fire. He realized the mines were not just a place of labor, they were a prison. A prison for something older than the village. The walls seemed to pulse, as if breathing. And then, the ground shook. A rumble echoed from the depths. Something stirred. From the darkness, glowing eyes appeared. Many eyes. Watching. Waiting. Elias gripped his dagger tightly. This ends now. He spoke words from the old tongue, words to bind and protect. The creatures hissed and lunged. The fight was brutal. Stones fell. Flames flickered. But Elias's resolve was unyielding. With every strike, he named the unnamed, giving them form, voice, and finally, peace. When dawn broke, Elias emerged from the mine entrance battered, bloodied, but alive. He looked back once. The eyes were gone. The singing silenced. But he knew it was not the end. Because shadows beneath the mountain never truly sleep. And names alone cannot hold back what refuses to be forgotten. Elias returned to Grimvik under a sky swollen with storm clouds. The village, blanketed in snow and silence, seemed smaller somehow, its scars visible beneath the thin veil of peace. Yet in his heart, the chill had only deepened. The pendant around his neck pulsed faintly, as if tethered to a rhythm older than time. Ingrid met him at the edge of the village. Her eyes, darkened by worry and years of bearing grim truths, searched his face. "They're stirring again," she said quietly. "Not just in the mines, but here among us." Elias nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The memory from the fire winter haunted him. The pact his mother had made. The red veil. And the cryptic warning he had received in his journal, written in a stranger's hand. The fire never stopped burning. You just stopped looking. That night, Elias sat by the dying embers of a hearth in the longhouse. His journal lay open, pages filled with names, symbols, and hastily sketched sigils. His pen hovered over a blank page, then began to write. "I am the blood bound to this place. The son of those who made promises in fire and snow. But the truth I seek lies buried deeper than graves and memories." He traced the crescent sun pendant with trembling fingers. Suddenly, a sharp knock at the door jolted him. He opened it cautiously. Standing in the snow was a man, a stranger, cloaked in shadow and wearing a twisted smile. "My name is Leaf," he said, voice low but steady. "And I come with warnings." Leaf was a keeper of secrets, a guardian of Grimvik's darker histories. He revealed a hidden truth: the pact made during the fire winter was only one part of a larger cycle. Every generation, a child of the rune bloodline would be drawn back to Grimvik, to face the singer and the shadows she commanded. "This cycle has lasted centuries," Leaf said. and it will not end until the singer's curse is broken at its source. Elias's breath caught. The source. Leaf nodded. Your mother's mother. Your grandmother, Vilhild. She too made a choice, one that bound the singer to our world. Guided by Leaf, Elias ventured to a forgotten chamber beneath the ruins of the church. The air grew colder as they descended stone steps carved with runes pulsing faintly with power. At the bottom, an ancient altar stood, cracked and covered in dust. Upon it lay a tattered journal, the writings of Vilhild herself. Elias opened the fragile pages, and the world around him seemed to blur. The journal told a story of desperation and love, a tale of a woman who had sought to protect her family and village from a darkness that threatened to consume all. Vilhild had been a healer, respected and feared. When the shadows first crept into Grimvik, she had made a bargain with the singer not to save herself, but to save the children. But the bargain was twisted. The singer's promise came with a price, a curse that trapped souls in endless torment. Vilhild's final entry was a plea. If my blood must pay the price, then so be it. But may my son one day undo what I have wrought. Back in the longhouse, Elias absorbed the weight of this revelation. He was the key, the last hope to end the curse. But the path was perilous. He needed allies. He sought out the village elders, those few who still remembered the old ways and whispered truths beneath the church bells. Together, they prepared rituals, gathering ancient relics and crafting wards of power. As the night of reckoning approached, Elias dreamed again. The singer appeared, but not as a tormentor. She was a girl, fragile and lost. "Why do you fight me?" she asked, voice trembling. "Because you were made into a monster," Elias replied. "Because you deserve peace." She looked away, shadows flickering in her eyes. "Then help me," she whispered. "Help me break the cycle." The final confrontation loomed. Elias stood at the center of the village square, candles burning bright, runes inscribed in the snow. The singer emerged, her red veil flowing like liquid flame, but her eyes held a flicker of hope. They spoke words older than memory, invoking names long forgotten. The air crackled with energy as the village held its breath. In that moment, Elias understood. To save Grimvik, he must sacrifice more than courage. He must sacrifice himself. But his voice would become the song that finally frees the lost. The moon hung low over Grimvik, its pale light casting long shadows across the snow-covered village square. Candles flickered in the biting cold, their flames dancing as if alive, surrounded by intricate runes carved deep into the frozen earth. Elias stood at the center of the circle, his breath a cloud of mist. His fingers clutched the pendant, its warmth now like a heartbeat pulsing through his veins. Around him, the villagers, few but steadfast, held hands, their faces pale but resolute. In the distance, a deep, haunting melody began. The song. The singer appeared through a veil of crimson mist, her figure both terrifying and heartbreakingly human. Her eyes, once hollow voids, now shimmered with untold sorrow. "You have come to end me," she said softly, voice like wind through dead branches. "I have come to free you," Elias replied, steady despite the storm roaring inside him. The air thickened as the singer's voice rose, weaving notes that bent the very fabric of reality. Shadows emerged from the woods, twisted shapes with eyes like embers, circling the village. Elias raised the pendant, chanting the ancient words learned from his grandmother's journal and Leaf's teachings. The runes glowed brighter, pushing back the encroaching darkness. But the singer's song was relentless. She sang not just of pain, but of memories of a child named Thora, a young girl who once was pure light before fear and betrayal turned her into a spirit of vengeance. Elias's heart ached. Thora was not an enemy. She was family. His mother's sister, his aunt, lost to the curse centuries ago. The villagers began to falter as shadows pressed closer, but Elias stepped forward, his voice unwavering. "Thora, aunt of my blood, hear me. Your suffering ends tonight." The singer's veil lifted briefly, revealing a face streaked with tears. Her song softened, becoming a lullaby. Elias closed his eyes, feeling the song's power course through him, binding his soul to the singer's own. In that moment, the village square transformed, a liminal space where past and present converged. Elias saw visions of the fire winter, the pact made in desperation, and the birth of the curse. He understood his choice. To break the cycle, Elias must offer himself as a vessel, a living anchor to absorb the pain and release the souls trapped in torment. He looked at Ingrid and Leaf, who nodded solemnly. "I accept," Elias whispered. The runes flared as he knelt, pendant raised high. The singer's voice blended with his chanting, the air shimmering as a brilliant light engulfed them. The shadows wailed, dissolving into the snow. When the light faded, Elias lay alone in the square. The curse was broken. Thora's spirit, now freed, smiled gently before fading into dawn's first light. The villagers wept with relief. Elias's body was cold, but his spirit was at peace. He had become the song, the sacrifice that freed a village bound by sorrow. As dawn broke over Grimvik, the air was clear, the snow glistening like crystal. But far beyond the mountains, in the depths of the earth, a faint whisper echoed. The curse was lifted. But the story was far from over. The sun had risen over Grimvik, painting the snow with a golden hue. The village awoke from its long nightmare, bathed in a newfound peace, or so it seemed. Elias's sacrifice had freed the souls bound by the curse. His body lay at the center of the square, still and pale. But his spirit lingered, intertwined with the ancient magic that once enslaved the singer and the children she protected. As the villagers gathered to mourn, Ingrid stepped forward, clutching Elias's pendant tightly. "He gave us freedom," she said, voice cracking with emotion. "But his journey is not yet complete." Days passed, and strange signs began to appear. The pendant pulsed faintly, as if alive. The snow around Elias's resting place never melted, no matter how warm the sun grew. Shadows flitted at the edges of vision. Whispered voices called from the forest. One night, Elias's closest friend, Leaf, awoke from a restless sleep to find the pendant glowing with an eerie light. A faint melody drifted from it, the same haunting song the singer once sang. Leaf knew this was a message. Meanwhile, deep beneath Grimvik, in the forgotten tunnels of the Iron Fang mines, a new presence stirred. From the darkness, a figure emerged, a girl with fiery hair and eyes like molten gold. She carried no veil, but her voice carried the weight of countless forgotten souls. Her name was Freya. She was the last of the unnamed. Freya had heard the singer's song, and Elias's sacrifice had freed many, but not all. She vowed to find Elias's spirit and awaken the power left behind to protect the village from the lingering darkness and uncover secrets even the singer dared not speak. Ingrid and Leif, sensing the growing unrest, sought out the ancient tomes hidden in the village's oldest library. They uncovered prophecies of a silent song of power that could bind light and shadow, life and death. They realized Elias's sacrifice had opened a gateway not just for peace, but for new dangers. One evening, as the village slept, a chilling wind swept through the streets. Figures cloaked in shadow moved silently, carrying relics of old bones, feathers, and fragments of forgotten memories. They called themselves the Keepers of the Quiet. Their leader stepped forward, a man draped in black, face hidden beneath a hood. He spoke, "The balance has shifted. The silent song is awakening, and we will ensure it sings forever." Far away, beneath the mountain's root, Freya began to sing. Her voice was both a warning and a promise. The future of Grimvik and the legacy of Elias rested on a knife's edge. Winter's grasp on Grimvik had loosened, but the air remained thick with tension. The villagers moved cautiously, still haunted by shadows of the past. At the heart of the village, Elias's resting place had become a shrine. Candles burned day and night, prayers whispered for the soul who gave everything for their freedom. Yet, peace was fragile. Freya's song echoed through the mountains, a call to those who listened. The Keepers of the Quiet had gathered, their dark council ready to claim the power of the silent song for their own. Elias's spirit lingered between worlds, caught in the shimmering light of sacrifice and the dark pull of lingering curses. His voice, once silent, now wove a melody that bound life and death, past and future. He knew the final battle was near. Ingrid and Leif, armed with ancient relics and unyielding will, stood beside Elias's spirit in the liminal space between the living and the dead. The veil between worlds thinned. From the shadowed edges emerged the Keepers, their leader raising a staff crowned with bones, chanting a spell that would drown the village in eternal silence. But Elias, strengthened by the love of his family and the memories of the forgotten, sang louder. His voice was no longer his alone. It carried the hope of the children, the sorrow of the singer, and the promise of new beginnings. The melody rippled through the fabric of reality, breaking chains, healing wounds, and illuminating darkness. Freya, her voice rising in harmony, joined Elias. Together, their song shattered the Keeper's spell. The leader screamed, dissolving into ash, his power broken. The village exhaled as dawn broke, warm light spilling over snow and stone. Elias's spirit smiled, finally free. "Thank you," he whispered to the wind. Grimvik was reborn. The graves were named. The songs of sorrow transformed into songs of life. And the silent song became a melody of hope. As the villagers celebrated, a young girl approached the shrine. She carried a wooden horse painted bright red. In her hand, a ribbon fluttered in the breeze embroidered with a single word: "Remember." Title: The Silent Song of Grimvik, a tale of lost names and eternal sacrifice. Description: In the remote village of Grimvik, a haunting curse binds the restless souls of forgotten children and a mysterious spirit known as the Singer of Bones. Elias Rune, the last descendant of a bloodline intertwined with the village's darkest secrets, embarks on a perilous journey to break an ancient pact born from fire and sorrow. As shadows rise from the depths of cursed mines and forgotten graves, Elias must confront painful truths, make devastating sacrifices, and unite the living and the dead through the power of a song that transcends time. The Silent Song of Grimvik is a chilling yet heartfelt tale of memory, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds of family, where every name remembered brings hope, and every sacrifice echoes forever.